Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Lowdown on Low Code from the team at Analysis.tech. My name is Dave Marcus, and I cannot believe it's almost the end of January. It's just nuts. But it is what it is. And I have with me John Reimer, who I'm sure all of you know. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Very well. Excited to be with you today, Dave, for another fun conversation, fun and informative.
Very, very cool. And today we're really, really pleased to have a company represented that we've been kind of trying to get onto this podcast for quite some time. But in some ways, they've been so busy, doing so much good business and getting so much traction that it's taken us a little time to get there. So, firstly, let me welcome Cody Low. Cody leads all of the global pre-sales for Replit, one of the dominant players today in a space that most people kind of know as vibe coding. Whether that'll be a category that has a long-term goal or whether it doesn't, we'll have to see. But people like the stuff, they like what they can do with it, and we want to spend some time today talking with Cody, about that, both in terms of the category itself, usage patterns and so on, but also about Replit and their play in the market. So, Cody, let me give you a short period of time to sort of introduce yourself. Generally, what we like to do is take two approaches to this. One is give us a little bit of background as to kind of how you got to where you are today. What sort of led to this particular point in time. And then one of the things that our viewers actually like to hear as well is maybe something that most people don't know about you that might have nothing to do with a business context.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys. We had a previous conversation and went great. And when you invited me on the podcast, I was super pumped for it. So, and I think this is the first time I've actually done a podcast after joining Replit, right? So, very excited to talk about it. So, I came onto Replit because I joined the Marine Corps right out of college, and I was an infantry officer. And when we were on deployment during COVID and nothing was really happening because everything was locked down, we had these long sessions where we were in the tactical operations center, just where you're kind of waiting for stuff to show up. And because it was COVID, nothing was happening. And we were working on government computers, so Nipper computers, which are like the unclassed computers. And when you're using those, they're Windows machines, the terminals are locked down. Like I had kind of at that point decided that I was going to move out of the Marine Corps, and I knew that I wanted to become a software developer because I knew I wanted to work in software. And even if I was going to go do something else, I liked the approach and philosophy that the Marine Corps had of every Marine or rifleman, which is even if you're a chef, if you're like a cook, if you're a lawyer, if you're a pilot, like first and foremost, the reason why this organization exists is because there's a 19-year-old leading a couple 18-year-olds jumping in a hole, and you have to understand that guy's job intimately and deeply and how you support that job. And so coming into software, I knew like, hey, just probably like other military guys, I might be better suited for a leadership position or sales or product management or something like that. But I knew that I wouldn't want to do that until could deeply understand software. And so I knew I needed to learn how to code. And so when I was working on those government computers, Replit as sort of the IDE in the browser was the only way I could do it. Right. And so like I was jamming during those sessions where nothing was really happening, just jamming on Replit, kind of teaching myself to code. I came out, I got a master's in computer science, and then I was working on open source projects for a while, and mostly in Bitcoin space. And Replit was kind of always sort of like the touch point for me of like completely changed my life, completely changed my career. And then I saw a very early version of the agent. And I said, this is the coolest product of all time. And I have to go work at this company. And I kind of knew everybody because there's all parts of these little parts of Replit where I see of like me just as a power user from the early days, like giving feedback and them implementing it. And so I kind of knew everybody in the company. And so I said, hey, I just want to work at this company. I don't really care like what role, like I'm an engineer right now, so I can apply for that. But when I came in, we had just started seeing that there was like the possibility of product market fit on the enterprise side. And so we had just brought on a VP of sales, and he was more non-technical. And so he was like, hey, I want to hire somebody who's like deeply technical so he can wingman with me when we're starting to do this enterprise motion. And so that's what I did for the first couple months, was like kind of wingmanning with him, establishing that enterprise product market fit. And then once we launched Agent V2, that was kind of, hey, early version of Agent, you could kind of make a quick little mock-up for something. Agent 2, we started seeing like entrepreneurial and enterprising and high agency people at companies being able to build successfully internal tools, which we really see as like the product market fit of Replit, of building out all of the internal tooling within a company and being able to quickly do prototypes, mock-ups, validate ideas, all of that. And so once we had that product market fit, then the goal became, okay, how do we scale this out, right? And so that's been sort of the role that I've done over the last couple of months. Once we establish that product market fit, is how do we scale the team? Now we've got about 30 people. We're growing to like 250, right? Is like, how do we take me and scale me across multiple different teams? And how do we bring people on and just massively accelerate them like in their first couple of months? How are they closing multiple millions of in new deals? So
I love that. And I think it aligns so well with, software companies in general, bringing people from their user base into the company who've had this experience, who kind of know what they want, who can explain this in ways that a typical software developer in a company who built the product may not necessarily always understand. So that's an incredibly good thing. John, over to you.
Well, before we do, so tell us something people don't know about you. I love the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
You gotta
I'd say
foxhole, but anyway.
Yeah, I'd say probably like the thing that people don't know is that a lot of what I do and a lot of the way that we're moving at Replit is like heavily influenced through a sort of a military doctrine called maneuver warfare. And so a thing that I don't really talk about it a lot because we try to mostly keep it on like the product side and the sort of software side of things. But sort of all of the frames of reference that I'm using are like applying this kind of long-standing doctrine of called maneuver warfare. And there's a really good book that Reid Hoffman wrote called Blitz Scaling, which is about basically taking like blitzkrieg tactics from like during World War I and into World War II from the German stormtroopers and applying those to companies like Airbnb to massively scale. And so a lot of the terminology and a lot of the things we do on the Replit side, like you can kind of think of in the context of that sort of long tradition of maneuver warfare. And I spend a lot of time sort of thinking about the historical tradition of that and how it can apply today. And so like a lot of these conversations that we're going to be having here, I'll try to not use as many military and tactical terms for it. But a lot of that, like in my mind, as I'm thinking of it in terms of those tactics.
Got it. Very interesting. I'll have to go and check that book out. So, and I will. So Kody, Dave mentioned that Replit is closely associated with the term vibe coding, which is a very hot topic, hot term. But you see it everywhere. But a lot of people don't seem to agree on what it really means. So, what does it mean to you and to Replit? How should people think about it? What's the real value of it?
Yeah. So with vibe coding, the term comes from Andrej Karpathy, and it was something that he noticed. This was kind of started taking off around like March or so of last year. That now that agents are writing the software, is that you are not like kind of manually doing it yourself. Is that you can kind of not have to think about it as much. And so previously, like the primary job and role of the software engineer was when you were writing code to really deeply think about the actual code that you're writing. But the agents were getting so fast and they were getting so good that they were taking people who maybe they don't understand the full architecture of the system up front, but they're able to make a lot of progress with it, right? So like in terms of vibe coding as a category, I think of it more of as like a tool that you kind of give everybody. And so sort of like last military analogy I'll use for this one is that when like the one thing that made Roman legionnaires different than everyone else that they fought against was that Roman legionnaires were fundamentally combat engineers. Is that it wasn't just that the legionnaires would show up with their weapons, is that they also carried something called a delabra, which is basically like an entrenching tool or like a little hatchet or pickaxe. And the expectation for everybody in the Legion was that when you show up somewhere, you're going to build your own tools. Like you're going to show up on place and maybe you're like force on force, exactly the same size, but you're going to go to sleep. They're going to wake up and you're going to have built an entire fort. You're going to have a fortified position. You're going to have ballistas. You're going to have catapults. They're just going to show up the next day. And suddenly you're going to have one person and everybody's kind of expected to be able to contribute to do that, who's able to build all that out themselves. And that's what I kind of see vibe coding as, is that you sort of more of like a vibe building or like just a building tool where you can kind of give it to everybody in the company. And the expectation is now no longer, hey, we're going to throw it over for these guys to do all our building for us. Sort of like the expectation is you are able to make significant progress using this tool yourself. And maybe you're not going to be able to build a whole skyscraper by yourself with it, but you're going to be able to blow everybody away. And it's really just a limitation of your ingenuity and how you decide to apply it in that circumstance. So the big vibe coding thing behind it is maybe like, hey, the way to think about it is more of a, hey, this is now, like previously, before people had like the printing press or whatever, you had like this tiny little group that had to do with the writing for everybody. They were monks, right? Who like did all that for people. And
Right.
then once you kind of give everybody pens and once you give everybody typewriters, then sort of the expectation of whatever job that you're doing is that you're also able to take your idea, write it down, print it to millions of copies and massively scale it.
Fascinating. Dave.
Brilliant. So I think that that's a really good analogy as well. I quite like that. So let's shift a little from the category, if you like, or the outcomes of expected to Replit. Clearly, this has been a pretty amazing story so far. You guys have announced, phenomenal numbers, even though you're still a private company. You've announced significant growth. There's a lot of really great stories as well as significant expectations in the market as a whole for Replit. And so, let me ask you, how do you see Replit being different from the other players in the space that are out there today? Because with a category like this being established, even somewhat recently, there are a lot of players. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, some of them are sort of measured in a similar way. But what makes you guys different?
Yeah. So the thing that we try to emphasize and the thing that I think that we're best at is that we try to have the entire end-to-end experience. And the reason why we do that is because, again, what kind of emphasizing the vibe coding is that if the tool you're using is just Frankensteining together a bunch of third-party tools, then you're going to very quickly hit limitations and have to understand all of those third-party tools and how they're being pieced and fit together. And what we're going for with Replit is that we're going to have basically built out as a platform the entire end-to-end experience of you put your idea in and we put it to work for you. Is that we can get to the prototype, we can build more complex prototypes, we can fork the prototype, we can deploy the prototype, we can have feedback on the prototype that immediately gets action by the other agents on it. And because we have the kind of end-to-end experience there, the user doesn't really have to understand everything that's going on in order to make massive progress and deliver massive value. And so that's the real place that we start seeing Replit versus a lot of the competition, is that for Replit is you go in and you basically, depending on your level of like agency and ingenuity, you can get extremely far in shocking ways. And what we find with most of the other competitors is that you can get like you can move a little bit, but it's not as fast as you'd like it to be. And you kind of hit an upper limit of complexity very quick. So to go back to the original analogy there, think of like Replit, the agent, as like the hatchet, I would say, or like the Delabra or the pickaxe, right? Like I think of Replit, the platform, as like, hey, if you show up at the pickaxe and it's like the area around you doesn't have any trees and it doesn't have any like gold and it doesn't have any of these things, like, yes, you can make progress, but not as much progress if you're working in an environment where we're laying out all of the tools for you and laying out all of the resources for you and making them play extremely nicely with that tool. That's kind of the way that I think about it in my mind.
Brilliant, John.
So we at analysis.tech have a lot of experience doing research, talking to people about empowering business people, which I think is what you're advocating, Cody.
Yep.
Do you encounter, I can just imagine some of the people I've talked to in the past, they're listening to you and their heads are exploding and they're going, oh my God, this is citizen development on steroids. It's going to be an absolute mess. How the hell are we ever going to come out of this with something that is safe and effective? Do you hear that? And how do you respond?
Yeah, we definitely hear it. we definitely hear it as a concern. And I think generally the best way to do it is to just kind of show them and get them to use the tool, because now we have sort of all of the enterprise controls in place that everyone kind of wanted and weren't there originally with on any of these platforms. But now we've kind of established them. And so, again, to continue with the analogy, is like, we set out the area where the guy with his hatchet lands. It's got beautiful amounts of resources. There's trees everywhere, and someone could be afraid of like, oh, hey, what's he going to build when he goes in this? But like that whole box is in like, because we're building it in the cloud, because we're controlling the end-to-end environment, we can do all the enterprise auditing software that you want on top of that, right? So SIEM compatible logs, like enterprise audit APIs, all that sort of thing that you'd want for when you're allowing people to build. So like our kind of goal that we're doing, and the place that we think that we're getting very close to, is that we have this beautiful cloud sandbox you can give to any knowledge worker at your company. And you can say, hey, build anything that you want. And it doesn't go behind your SSO. We get all the logs and monitoring that we want. And so people can be very free to explore their ideas and then not be afraid themselves that they're going to do something that's going to make a mistake, but also have all the controls in place around that. So I would say like early on, like that was a major concern. And you saw a lot of those issues with people doing local development of like, you'd give like Claude Code or Cursor to some totally non-technical person and they'd bork their computer in like 20 minutes, right? Is like the nice thing about our cloud sandbox is that since we control the end-to-end environment, we have full version controlling across everything. The database we spin up with you is version controlled along with the code, the object storage as well. Like when we do deployments, we can do full rollbacks. We have full like everything you'd want in terms of you can freely change things. You can freely do whatever you want within the limitations set by your enterprise, and also with the ability to kind of atomically roll back anything that you do. And so that's kind of the goal that we're going for, is we want that nice cloud sandbox for the knowledge worker to build whatever they want, but still do it within the controls of the enterprise.
Dave?
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about ideal customers and use cases. And so, Kody, when you think about the kind of customer, for instance, we will hear people say, Replit is brilliant for creating, a fairly large number of, I don't want to call them simple apps, simpler apps for the enterprise that, for instance, IT may never get to service the business. So that's sort of this long tail thing. Or, to what extent is Replit ready for the big time? I use two examples. If I'm trying to create an application that is all about helping me, who is the person in the accounts payable department in finance, process a set of invoices, run through some really simple workflow, and update my finance system. And that's the thing. And I'm not trying to trivialize this, but it's a smaller, simpler application than something that says the largest insurance company on the planet is looking to totally replatform their claims management system end to end. And so those are two very different worlds. And so how do you see Replit fitting into either or both of those worlds?
Yeah. So I'd say that I can talk about where we are today, and then I can talk about what I think is the more important question, which is like, in backgammon, it's not about the move, it's about the move after the move. It's about, hey, what's the direction that's going? What's the pace we're going? And are we accelerating? And I'd say the answer to that is that the direction we're going that's absolutely true. The pace that we're going is it's going to come faster than you think. And I'd say that there's already examples of people doing that live. So I'll talk about where we currently sit, is that right now you're able to do that. And if you are a software engineer, fundamentally Replit is just a code platform, right? But it's a code platform with, the whole atomic environments, the whole like version controlling everything, a lot of stuff out of the box for you. And so if you're a software engineer, you can just build the same way you would want to and go exactly as far as you would during local dev, right? And so, for example, like I worked on one of the open source projects I worked on for a long time in Bitcoin was Fedimint, which is like a federated Chaumian e-cashment, right? So like extremely different kind of networking problems, extremely different encryption problems, a lot of like enterprise security. The whole thing is built in Rust, right? Is that like I can work on that productively on Replit today. But like why I'm able to do that is because I'm a software engineer. I understand like the larger parts of the system, and it's fundamentally working in code. Would I want someone non-technical using Replit to work on that? Probably not. right? But directionally, we are absolutely going there, and we're going there faster than people think. So let me talk about like two quick examples I've seen kind of like in the market with Replit, right? So one of them is like this is one of our favorite stories is Zillow. Zillow is kind of the place to go if you want to buy a house anywhere in the United States, right? And they're expanding around the world. So there was one guy at that company, his name's Mike, and he sort of straddles between product and operations. And he was somebody who just is in charge of, hey, when we're routing leads, so they come in, they say, I want to buy a house in Austin. They say, okay, like who does that lead go to? And does that person, like the realtor they connect them to, close a sale? And so he's the guy that owns that number, but he doesn't have technical people on his team. He has to throw stuff over the wall to get the software engineers to work on it. And he was like, hey, I have very strong intuition that we are doing this incorrectly. And me being closest to this problem, I think that there are a bunch of ways we can improve this. And so we've been working on like internal alignment of making presentations and making documents and all those kinds of things. And he just couldn't get it prioritized, right? Because there are other competing things from people who don't have the same problems that he has, who don't experience the same pain that he experiences. And so he's just not able to get it prioritized. So he's spending hours and hours and hours a week just trying to get people to agree with him that this is a problem. And so what he did instead, and what was amazing with Mike, was that he did this with V1 of the agent, not even V2, not even V3, is he goes out and he starts building a couple micro apps. He builds some of like, hey, we're like basically round robining these to just people in Austin. How about I make a net new app? So I'm not going to connect it into the internal data yet, but I'm going to make a net new app that just goes to all those realtors and says, hey, this is how you update and tell me your availability, so that we don't give you a lead if you're like off work for like a vacation or something, right? Then he makes another one and he says, hey, let's start collecting and looking at historical data of what specific neighborhoods do these guys actually do better in. And so he takes that and now he has actual working prototypes. He's able to start testing them himself. And now instead of coming and trying to get alignment with this is my vision for things, he's coming and saying, hey, this is working. I can prove that it's working on a small scale. And instead of getting 6 engineers for 6 weeks to come work on this, I want 2 engineers to come QA what I did for like a week before we start expanding this out. And so that one, like it ended up proving like extremely valuable to Zillow, is that like initially when they came to us, they were like, hey, this is driving like 10 million in ARR. Like the updated numbers for that of like over time is this is closer to like 100 million ARR. And this is like one guy who's closest to the problem being able to prototype and kind of prove out that, hey, this is a potential solution and work toward that. And so the big one that I would say is every business is facing this right now is that you have people coming to you with problems, and every leader knows that like, hey, don't come to me with a problem if you don't give me options, right? And so now what you can do with Replit is basically anyone who's very close to a problem can create prototypes and create options off of it. And so now they're not coming with, this is the problem. Engineers, can you come up with something? And product managers, can you spend 6 weeks trying to go talk to the same customers I've been talking to for the last 6 months to try to understand what I'm talking about? Is that they come with it and they say, this is the problem. This is a better solution. And I've tried 4 different ways with users already. And this is the one I think is most promising. So let's try to put like gasoline on this fire.
And I'm guessing, like, Kody, as a result of that, you get to a stage where even at some point in time, if that, I'll use your term prototype,
Mhm.
if that needs to now be productionized,
Yeah.
that at that particular point in time, firstly, the business person that had the requirement knows what they want.
Yeah.
They've been able to express it and they've been able to test it, at least to a degree. And the people that they would otherwise give a set of documents to that describe this requirement, who may be hardcore developers, they no longer have to just get a document and start from scratch.
Correct.
They have a baseline to start off with that makes it significantly quicker to bring something to formal production. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. Then what I'd say, this is where it's important to say where we're going and the pace that we're going at, is because like version 1 of the agent was we could only build Flask applications. It was a very tight space for those. The version 2 of the agent, we were very reliable for building full stack TypeScript. We could do Flask, we could do Streamlit applications. Like the Snowflake guys said that we were the largest originator of Streamlit apps of anyone on the internet. Then like we had a couple other stacks that we were able to do. And the direction that we're going and what we've seen a lot of adoption for, and this is kind of what my big focus has been on at the company over the last couple of months, is now we can get the Replit agent, even within the bounds of our environment, to properly work on code bases that match the production stacks. So that's what I kind of do on the field engineering side, is that I work with the company's engineers and the company's designers, and I say, let's go look at your Figma. Let's turn that into a design system that we can make the agent use productively. Let's go look at your production code bases. I see these guys are using Databricks a lot. Let's use the Databricks connector and set up service accounts so that people can vibe code Databricks apps on top of them. Like, let's go look at your production code base. Oh, it's all Java. Well, Replit is a generic code platform. Let's make it so that when you're vibe coding your apps, that the backends are already written in Java using the stacks that you want. And then we're trying to match those kind of things so that that's kind of like the first thing that I do when I like close with a company, is that I kind of do like a big session with the engineers and the designers there. And I say, hey, you guys are about to get a lot of volume coming your way. And so like, this is your time to work with me and my team to make sure that that volume matches what you want, right? Like, let's make sure that every time they go through, there's the security review. Let's put your documentation down so that every time before you hit publish, the agent has to step by step go through your documentation, use your CLI, SAST, and DAST tools, all those things, and just handle it on behalf of the user, but do it aligned with what the production code base is going to look like to make that handoff easier. And again, what I'm saying is the direction we're going is that we're getting better and better over time. And the pace at which we're getting better is accelerating. And so probably like early this year, definitely by next year, is like you will be able to on Replit confidently create code in whatever stack you want that matches the business requirements that you're going into.
Got it, John.
Awesome. Hey, let's take a quick commercial break. This is Lowdown on Low Code, a mostly weekly podcast brought to you by your friends at analysis.tech. Analysis.tech is a firm devoted to understanding and educating and analyzing the low code market. And we include AI very much in the frame of our work. If you like this content, you like what you're seeing, check out the other podcasts. There's about 60 or 80 of them. Hit the like button, tell your friends. We're here for the low code community to help inform progress among the low code community. Okay. And find us at analysis.tech. Pretty simple. Okay.
And let me throw one other thing in, John, just before you go on. So also over the last couple of months, we've been producing a fair amount of research. It is all available to you on analysis.tech. We don't require anything other than your business email address to get access to the research. So please go and take a look, give us some feedback, let us know the kind of things that you'd like, and help us to drive and prioritize what we do from now.
Thank you. So Kody, in the last part of the conversation, you were talking about where Replit's going and what kind of the ambition is, and obviously it's unfolding pretty quickly. I think there's a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions about the impact of the kind of work you're doing and the application of agents to software development in general, but particularly about low code. There are people out there who say kind of things that Kody's describing are going to kill off low code. It's not relevant anymore. How do you guys see that? Is this going to be the death of low code, or is low code just going to evolve in some way that we need to understand?
Yeah, so I think the direction that we're going is that when you talk about low code, like my understanding of like a lot of the old low code platforms was that the way that they represented themselves and kind of the highest level of complexity you could get to would be limited by the way that they're representing the low code thing to the user, right? Is they're not actually representing things direct in code. And so because of that, what we've found with Replit is that over time, as it gets easier to represent things direct in code, then it's going to be kind of eating into that part of the market. And so, like, let me give you a very quick example of this. Is that, like, my wife, like, she's a nurse practitioner and a midwife. Is that she, when she was originally making some websites, when she was kind of freelancing stuff for a while, like working as a doula, that kind of thing, is she would use something like Wix because she just didn't want to think about the code and she wanted to be able to have like the drag and drop and all that kind of thing. And she would very quickly hit the upper limits of complexity for that, of like, hey, now I want to add something a little bit more complex and I don't really see like a visual option for it. And I can't really think about it visually in this way, if it's more of something complex in the back end. And so then she just wouldn't add it. Right. And so with her, I had her kind of rebuild out everything on Replit. And what's nice about that is that, yes, you still have all the visual development for it. But when you try to hit that upper limit of complexity, you do have access to the underlying code. You do have the ability to manipulate it. You do have the ability to spin up servers, databases, backends, all like, like one of the things I thought was interesting when she was doing it was she said, hey, this app isn't that fast. Can you help me make it faster? And then like I was shocked because totally non-technical is like I saw her spin up a Redis caching service on top of her site. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like there's no way you would have ever been able to do this. And so what I'd say is that because what we're doing is we're like it's just code is like the kind of pithy thing that I say sometimes when people are like, is it possible to do XYZ on Replit? I'm saying, hey, it's just code. Everything's possible, right? Like, and so I think that of like, because you're growing out of this where fundamentally there is no upper limit to the complexity, is that's the direction that it kind of eats into that market. And then the kind of other direction that it goes into is the place that I've been seeing people with Replit of that, like we were originally this cloud IDE, and the goal of Replit when we were building out the sort of fleet of cloud services was we want to get the box as close to the user as possible, right? So that when the user hits backspace, is that like they see it update as fast as possible. That was the kind of big goal. So Replit before the agent had its big global fleet, and the whole problem of the cloud services team was how do we get the box, the container, the Docker container that spins up with your development environment, how do we get those close to the user as possible? What we found very quickly with the agent is that basically people stopped trying to do things themselves. And even if it might have been faster than for them to do it themselves, they'd put it in through the agent. Is kind of the direction that everyone's going, is that they want to be able to freeform talk and then have the agent decide how to implement that for them. And so you kind of seen a big change in our cloud architecture is now everything that we do is focused on getting the development environment as close to the AI as possible. Like the way to think about it is that the primary user of Replit is no longer the user. The primary user of Replit is the agent. And so that's the other direction that I'm seeing, is that all of the things that people are doing to make things easier for the user are not directionally correct. The things that are directionally correct are making it easier and faster for the agent to work on it. And the thing that the agent can work on better is open source standards, is directly in code, is not doing any sort of proprietary formats. So that's the kind of two directions that I see it affecting low code right now.
Right. Thank you. Dave.
Sure. So I want to expand a little on John's question and just talk about visual IDEs for a second. So, in this vibing world, we've all kind of started getting used to this idea of I go to a conversational interface, a chat GPT-like thing. And I type in kind of, I'm looking to do this, or I want to build this, and here's a way I want to describe what I'm looking for, et cetera, et cetera. But I've personally been in situations where I've used tools like this that get me to a particular point and where the kind of thing I'm looking to change, for instance. So I get a user experience, and the vibing tool has put the submit button on the left-hand side of the page, and I just want the damn submit button on the right-hand side of the page. But I don't want to have to try to prompt this thing to understand. I just want to drag and drop the damn button from the left to the right-hand side, say, put it there and continue. And I might continue conversationally. And so I guess I just want to use this to try to understand, how do you think about sort of hybrid IDEs with regards to the way that people work?
Yeah. So we definitely see that. Like a very clean way of seeing that on Replit is that when you first start a new app, we either start you in design mode or we start you in app mode. And then the thing that's coming is that we're going to have it so that we just start you as an app, and you can kind of freely go between doing design and like those kind of very specific tweaks that you want to do on like a specific page, and kind of free forming, more vibing of like dropping kind of free form instruction of the agent and coming back 3 hours later. So I'd say that we definitely want to support both of those, and we see people use it the both ways. I'd say that currently, like the more productive way to do it, because it's skating where the puck is going, is that the agents are just going to get way better over time of directly understanding your intent and being able to act on them. And so what I'd say is that where we see most people going is that originally with Replit, they find like, oh, hey, there's some things where I'm doing here where I would want to do this visual stuff. And then they do it, we have the tooling for it or whatever. But what we see across user patterns is over time, they stop using it as much and they go more and more into the agent. Because like the sort of way to think about it, right, is that like something we've been playing with is kind of Replit's like where we put your ideas to work, right? And you can kind of think of when you have the idea, having to structure it into your action as opposed to just putting the idea into the agent. And over time, it's getting better and better at doing that structure into the action that you would have done. And so basically the direction that we're going, again, like I keep talking about this as the direction because that's like, I think the more relevant piece of this, because it's accelerating, we're going to get there faster than you think, is that in the time for you to articulate that I want to move this to this location, currently it's like, if you want to get the best out of that through the conversational thing, is that you want to use like the element selector, you want to click there, you want to do a multi-element selector, you want to have like, you have to want to do a very structured prompt and make it do that and not, but the direction that we're going is that you will be able to say, I want this to go there without even selecting it. And the agent will be able to infer based off of the logs, based off the testing, based off of what it had just shown you, that these are the two things he's probably talking about. And it's going to get more and more accurate over time. And so that's where I would say is like, yes, today there are certain circumstances where you'd want to do it. The agents are just getting so much better at being able to do those. And so you can either like try to build that tool for where the puck is, or you can try to build the tool for where the puck is going.
Yeah. Got it. Cody,
John,
let's wrap up with you're describing a way of working, including empowering everybody, that most organizations are coming to. We've been advocating this for a long time, by the way, but it's not easy to get there, particularly if you're a large organization with a lot of legacy. For when you're advising clients and trying to get them to really embrace this view, what do you tell them are like the top two prerequisites for success? And then what are the top mistakes that they need to avoid in order to have success?
Yeah. So I'll talk about it from like the individual contributor role, and then I'll talk about it from the leader's role. Is that so for the individual contributor, basically the kind of like, you know how like Smokey the Bear, who says like, if you see something, say something, like only you are responsible for preventing wildfires, right? Is that like with Replit is like, if you see something, build something. Is that the places that we've seen people extremely successful with Replit is that they kind of encourage a culture of the company of that when you see something, when you see a problem, you are immediately responsible for starting to prototype options and solutions on top of that. There's no like, hey, we're going to report this off, I'm not responsible for this. Like kind of going back to the Marine Corps, like this is like where, and this is the analogy that I find helps with people, is that when you're during urban operations, is we call it MOUT, so military operations in urban terrain, is that like when you see a problem, when you see an uncovered door, when you see an uncovered window, if you see a gap in anything, it doesn't matter if you have like stars on your rank. It doesn't matter if you're an officer. It doesn't matter if you're a rifleman. It doesn't matter if you're anything else. You are responsible for covering down on that problem until somebody taps you on the shoulder and hands you off. Right. And so that's what I see a lot of people doing very successfully with Replit is that you give it out to everybody and everybody gets a culture of, hey, when I see a problem, I can immediately start actioning it. And maybe I'm actioning it in the wrong way, right? But action produces information, right? Like it is more valuable for you to come to me with a problem and 5 different options, which you tried and didn't work, than it is for you to just come to me with the problem. And now I have to do all of the exploration, figure out the tasking, all of that kind of stuff. Because during that whole period, the problem, like nobody's moving on it, right? So that's kind of from the individual contributor role, is like kind of having that position of, when I see something, I do something. When I see something, I build something. It's like, if this is an opportunity, immediately start trying to exploit that opportunity, right? Then I'd say from the leadership side is like, there are companies that are doing this better than others, is that they have, from the leadership, really emphasizing and pushing down a culture of, hey, don't come to me with problems, come to me with prototypes, right? And so like what I'd say is, that's another thing that kind of from the Marine Corps, like we would crush guys for that, is like, hey, don't come to me with problems, come to me with options, right? Is that because like for me, like as like an infantry officer, is that like I've spent the last like 4 years honing my craft, being better at everything than everyone else, but I don't want to have to, like, I have to fight the whole company, right? Like I can't just be fighting your problem right now. Like I need you to fight your problem. And when you have approached these things and given me options, I'll use my experience to just quickly say, that's the right one, and go. Right? Like there's a very famous quote from General Mattis, who he's like absolute legend within Marine Corps. He was former SecDef. And so for him, there's a very famous moment where a reporter was with him, and he's like, someone comes up to him and they say, hey, here's this like major operation that we're doing, XYZ. Here's these 3 decision points that I have, or whatever. And then he just like picks one and then goes. And then they say, hey, how did you make that decision as the leader, right? Like, how did you make a decision? Like, you're putting people's lives on the line. How did you make this decision of like potentially like sending people to their death across these 3 things in seconds? And then he said, hey, I've been working on making that decision for 30 years, right? Like my whole job has been developing and understanding the larger context of these things, so that when I see these options, I know which one is better and which one to continue down. And so there's companies that are doing that much better than others, which is, once you get a vibe coding tool in place, the expectation does need to be that every one of your ICs is coming to you with options. And again, it's valuable if they're coming to you with bad options versus just coming to you with a problem, right? And that's kind of the place that we're seeing is with Replit right now. Like when Agent V1, you would come with very, very, very like dirty prototypes for things, right? That's still valuable. Over time, those options are getting better and better and better. And so you can have higher fidelity communication, and you can have like the leaders doing the things that are their most important for. You can have the ICs immediately actioning problems.
Right. Thank you. This conversation has really significantly added to the dialogue about empowerment. Really appreciate it. Dave, why don't you wrap us up, right?
Yeah, sure. Kody, I do want to wrap you up just by talking about something else that's very topical today. So you use the term agent in a Replit context to describe a Replit thing that is helping you out to achieve an outcome.
Yep.
But let me flip this around for a second. The world is moving, or at least so it says, to a space where everything is going to be, no one's going to build apps anymore. People are going to build these agents that either with people's help or autonomously are going to do stuff. These agents are going to magically talk to each other in order to do something bigger than what they do individually. And that's going to represent sort of the next evolution of enterprise applications as we know them today. And I'm paraphrasing here. But I'd love your opinion on sort of how you have this discussion with customers where it isn't just about the Replit agent, which I think people implicitly understand, but more about this idea of, if the world's telling me I need to build agents, then what is Replit doing to make that possible? Or even, do you agree?
Yeah, so we do have a full agent builder. So you can tell agent, build me an agent, and it'll use Mastra for it. And so we find that to be like the kind of easiest and cleanest way to build agents right now, which is, it's all TypeScript based. It's like what the models perform best at. We work very closely with their team for developing it. So you can't just build agents direct on Replit. What I'd say is, there's a lot of people who think that the agents, you're just going to build it and it's just going to be great. And it's not true right now. Is like, you can build out an agent and you can work on improving it every single day and QAing it and improving it. And you can get it to probably like, I'm going to be stealing a lot from Jason Lemkin here, who's like a huge power user. He's like a good friend, and he's a power user of Replit, good friend. And also he's like done a lot of this himself. Like he's kind of, he went from having like 10 AEs or so working at SaaStr down to it's just him and his sort of chief of staff, who's also his chief AI officer. And they have like 20 agents, and he has like kind of on the desks around his office, he has like the names of the agents that he replaced that AE with, right? And so the way he talks about it, I've definitely seen this across multiple lines of business, is that the agent's not going to be as good as your best guy, but it's going to be about 80% as good. If you work on it really hard, if you improve the knowledge base, if you're spending an hour every day looking at all of its responses and logging, this is the place it worked, this is the place it didn't, it's not going to be as good as your best guy. It's going to be as good as about 80% of him, right? If you really work on it. Directionally, it's going to get better and better. Like maybe like by the end of the year, it'll be 90% as good. But what I can say is that for most businesses, like not everybody in your business is as good as your best guy. Like you do have a normal distribution, and you can probably make an agent, if you really work hard on it today, that's better than half of them. And so that is something that is changing the market, right? What I'd say is for the people who are really, really good, like your best guys, is that they're going to get massively empowered with this, and they're just going to be better. And then the other element of it is like the good analogy here that I think I've seen is that the people who are trying to treat the agent of like, we call it, I think it's like the doorman problem, right? Which is there's two ways that you can think about someone doing their job as a doorman, right? So one of them is he's the guy that opens and closes the door. And if you define him that way, then like, yes, we can install an automatic door and he's technically doing the job. And if that's what we're measuring, then yes, he has technically done it. But if you think of the doorman as, hey, he's not just opening and closing the door, he's also like greeting people when they come down the stairs. He's making it a happier place for people to be. There's a lot of kind of other things that he's doing. If like a homeless guy runs into the place or a fire starts down there or whatever, he's also able to sort of not do technically his job role, but make sure that the whole kind of business of running the building is working correctly. And if you think about the people that way, is that they're going to be people where, yes, you install the automatic door, but you also let that person do a better job of all of those other things that he was doing, which in the larger scope of the business, even though you can't really measure it as well, is technically more valuable. And so the people who are replacing him with the automatic door, they're not doing as well right now, and they're getting really like burned by doing so. But the people who are saying, hey, I can make the agent that it will do automated greetings for people. Like when people show up, it'll like automatically sort their mail for them, like all that kind of stuff, and have the doorman kind of do more of the things that he is better at and that kind of make the place a more special place. And the place that like, you know, people pick that building because that doorman is working there, that works awesome. Like that's something I see on Replit is that like we have like a really, really great team, especially on the field engineering side. And that for all these companies that are buying Replit, their primary concern is who is the person from your team who is going to be working with my team to make sure that this Replit deployment is successful. And for that one, like that needs a human, and that human needs to be great.
Yeah.
And so that's something where you could define it as like, hey, we're going to have like an automated setup process and stuff. But I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon.
Yep, that makes absolutely perfect sense, and I've certainly seen that in past roles myself. The fact
Yep.
that everyone needs kind of a helping hand, and that
Yep.
helping hand needs to be very personable. In today's world, Kody, this has been a really, really good session with you. Absolutely appreciate the time. I love some of the anecdotes. I think that it kind of makes things really simple to get and to understand, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing where you guys go.
Yeah.
Over the
Thanks.
next month.